Pamela Anderson's financial troubles did not arrive with scandalous headlines or a single catastrophic mistake. They crept in quietly, disguised as optimism, generosity, and a belief that success, once achieved, is permanent. For years, the world assumed that the woman who defined an era of popular culture and international television star, magazine icon, and household name must surely be immune to ordinary problems like unpaid bills or shrinking bank accounts. The truth was far less glamorous. At the height of her fame in the 1990s, Anderson earned impressive sums from Baywatch, modeling contracts, and global appearances. Yet those earnings were episodic, not permanent. Television salaries fluctuated, contracts expired, and the public's attention moved on faster than the financial obligations she accumulated. One of the earliest cracks appeared when she decided to build and renovate a dream home in Malibu. What began as a personal sanctuary became a financial sinkhole. Construction delays, escalating costs, and disputes with contractors caused expenses to spiral far beyond original estimates. Lawsuits followed. Payments were missed. Liens were placed on the property. What looked like a symbol of success became a constant reminder of financial strain. At the same time, Anderson trusted others to manage her money while she focused on work and family. That trust was not always rewarded. Tax obligations in both the United States and Canada went unpaid for years, not because of intentional evasion, but due to poor oversight and chaotic financial administration. Interest and penalties accumulated silently until they could no longer be ignored. When the figures became public, the narrative shifted overnight. The icon of excess was suddenly portrayed as irresponsible, reckless, and broken. Yet the most damaging factor was not mismanagement or debt alone. It was lifestyle inertia, the assumption that income would always rebound to its former peak. Anderson continued to live as if the next major payday was guaranteed. Homes, staff, travel, and generosity toward friends and cousins all reflected a version of her career that no longer existed. The math stopped working long before she was willing to admit it. There came a moment when denial was no longer possible. Bills outpaced income. Properties had to be sold. At one point, she chose to live modestly, even staying in temporary housing while legal and financial issues were resolved. For someone whose image had been built on abundance and visibility, this quiet contraction was deeply humbling. It forced a confrontation not just with numbers, but with identity. What followed was not a dramatic rescue, but a disciplined reinvention. Anderson accepted work not for prestige, but for stability. Reality television appearances, international projects, and stage performances, most notably her turn on Broadway in Chicago, were approached with a different mindset. These were no longer indulgences or experiments. They were structured income streams. She negotiated carefully, reduced intermediaries, and became directly involved in understanding how and when she was paid. Equally important was what she stopped doing. She downsized aggressively, cutting fixed costs that had once seemed untouchable. Large properties were replaced with simpler living arrangements. Personal expenses were scrutinized. Financial advisors were changed, then monitored. Taxes became a priority rather than an afterthought. For the first time, sustainability replaced image as the governing principle of her financial life. There was also a psychological shift. Anderson began to separate self-worth from net worth. Fame had taught her to perform confidence, even when reality was unstable. Recovery required the opposite: private honesty and public restraint. She learned to say no to projects that paid poorly, to investments she did not understand, to obligations rooted in guilt rather than necessity. This refusal, more than any paycheck, slowed the financial bleeding. Over time, stability returned, not suddenly, but measurably. Debts were resolved. Tax issues were settled. Income diversified across media, publishing, theater, and licensing rather than concentrated in a single volatile stream. The story, however, did not end with wealth restored to its former scale. That was never the point. The resolution lay elsewhere. The real turning point came when Anderson recognized that financial recovery is not about returning to a previous peak, but about building a structure that cannot collapse so easily again. She emerged with principles forged by experience rather than theory. Never assume today's success will fund tomorrow's life. Understand your own finances, even if experts are involved. Treat fixed costs as permanent commitments, not temporary luxuries. And address problems early, before silence turns them into crises. From the outside, her comeback appeared understated. There was no triumphant headline announcing redemption. Yet that quietness was the proof of success. Stability does not announce itself. It reveals itself in the absence of panic, in decisions made calmly, and in a life no longer dependent on constant rescue. Pamela Anderson's financial story is often summarized as a fall from excess. In reality, it is a case study in delayed accountability and earned clarity. The tension is not resolved by a single contract or performance, but by the moment she stopped trying to outpace her problems and instead outlasted them. The resolution holds because it is structural, not emotional, a life rebuilt on understanding rather than assumption, and on control rather than illusion.